to share about what we are doing at Perfectly Naughty. Perfectly Naughty, we opened 4.5 years ago in Granite Falls, and with my husband and I, we're a yarn and antique store. And I've always known that I had issues with certain fibers, and I always was challenged to be able to go to a yarn store and find good quality yarns to work with that weren't craft yarns. And I thought there's got to be something in between. But when we started our store, that was not our focus. Our focus really was on simply just creating an environment that was welcoming and nurturing to local stitchers in the area, and creating a place where they could meet each other and create friendships and have opportunities to give back into their communities. And so that's what we did. But the longer I sat in my space with all my lovely yarns, and many of which were some absolutely gorgeous wool yarns, the more issues I started having. And I had some local hand spuns, and I had some beautiful stuff. My hands know what really good wool yarn feels like, and all that kind of stuff. But it was just not working out for me. And the more I was there with it, the more I started having issues with my skin, burning and rashes and all kinds of stuff. And so tonight we're going to talk about what yarn allergies are and are not. We're going to talk about whether or not that matters. We're going to talk about some different types of yarns that people with yarn allergies might use, but at the same time, they're for everybody. I want all of you to try that. I hear every once in a while I'll hear somebody say, "I only knit with fill in the blank," and I just personally, my thought is, why limit yourself? There's a lot of really awesome, amazing fibers out there. So we're going to talk about some of them tonight. I'm going to grab my notes over here and my reading glasses so I can see. No, all right. So first a little bit more about my shop. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Live the Snow Co. Life. It is a local magazine that's really awesome, and the gal who does this, she's all about promoting Snohomish County businesses and lifestyles, and it's really, really fun. And I was featured in her January issue, so that was pretty fun. And so that's up here, and you can find their article on their website and that sort of thing. So that's one thing. How many of you are familiar with this magazine right here? Yeah. Anybody a subscriber? Have you read it yet? Because it just came out.
Not yet. Yeah, you're in it.
Yes, I am. So page 36 in here is an article talking about fiber allergies. And so I'm really super excited to have this opportunity to present what we're doing on a larger platform. And we'll be talking about some of the stuff that they talk about in here as well. And I'll try to integrate a bunch of stuff as I go, because I have to use the notes, guys. I am a very gregarious, and I'm very animated, and I talk loud, and I talk fast. So I apologize ahead of time if it feels like I'm steamrolling over everybody. So, yarn allergies and sensitivities are as real as our food allergies that we've all really become much more aware of, and some of us have developed later, or we're realizing later in our life that, oh my gosh, that's why this bothered me as a child. And I think that it's really exciting to see the yarn manufacturers starting to respond to that. So one of the things that I like to talk about is whether or not we're having an allergy, and what does it mean to have an allergy. And from a medical standpoint, unless you've had a medical test, whether it's a prick test or some sort of any other kind of medical test, it's possible. You can say you have an allergy, but that's the only way to know for absolutely positive. I personally have not had those allergy tests done. I recognize enough of the symptoms to feel confident in saying what I'm allergic to and what I am not. But a great majority of us fall under the category of contact skin dermatitis, which is a fancy way of saying that the fiber feels itchy and scratchy and irritates our skin. And it's not, but to me, when I think about that, it's not going to change what I do and what I wear to know if I'm having a medical reaction or if it simply just doesn't feel nice on my skin. Because I think that whatever it is that we put on our bodies or we put on our friends, it should feel fabulous, because what we wear is a statement of who we are. And if we don't feel fabulous in what we're wearing, we don't present ourselves fabulous. And I want everybody to feel fabulous about what we make and what we wear. So that's kind of my perspective on that. But some of the symptoms that people might experience would be itchy. We're all familiar with that itchiness. Some people will get some redness, maybe a rash. Some people actually have some respiratory involvement with some breathing issues and congestion, some itchy, watery eye things that happen. Those are generally more indicative of an actual allergy. But again, without a medical test, I'm not going to stand up here and say that. So let's see what else. I'm also going to say that I am not anti-wool. I think it's an amazing fiber. It's an absolutely amazing fiber. It just does not do nice things to my skin. So I'm not anti-wool. In our shop, we have several sit and stitch groups, and I encourage people, bring what you're working on. I don't ban people from bringing fibers into my shop. Every once in a while, somebody will bring in a project they're working on that I will react to, but it's pretty quick to see when I'm reacting, and they usually just put it away. Like, all right, we'll work on that later. So let's see, what else should we talk about? Yeah, wool is really amazing. It has a lot of elasticity. You know that. It takes color really well. It's really resilient. It has a very good thermal value. And there are some dermatologists that have decided that by using that, putting it on children when they're young and when they're babies, that it helps to reduce potential allergy issues further on in their life, in a similar way that maybe we do that with different foods in our kids, and we introduce them at certain stages in their life to help their bodies to be more prepared for it later. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I do have some experience in healthcare, but I'm not that's not my area of expertise. And so if you have concerns about that with young children that you want to help maybe desensitize them, I definitely would encourage you to be in contact with a really good allergist. There's a couple of really good naturopathic and environmental allergen doctors in the area here, and they'll help you figure out what things need to be avoided and what things we can build up a tolerance to because it's a case-by-case basis very much. One of the most important resources that I have found that for this topic is this book right here, No Sheep for You. And I actually, on my website, which is always under construction, but on my shopping page, I do have an Amazon affiliate link to this book on there, and would encourage you, if it's something you want to learn more about, to grab a copy. If you do, if you wouldn't mind using my link, it helps support my store. And as she was saying, your local yarn shops, we're here to serve you, but in order for us to serve you, we have to pay the rent. So that's kind of that disclaimer. But this book talks a lot about how these yarns are made, and that's what I'm going to go through right now, is some of the different yarns that we carry. And we're going to also talk about yarn substitutions, because one of the things, a lot of patterns are written and designed around wool yarns. And if we can't or don't want to or don't have access to that specific yarn, or maybe it's an older pattern and that yarn is just no longer available, we need to know how to substitute. So some of the rules to substitution for changing fibers altogether also apply in all sorts of ways. And things that we need to think about is the elasticity. We often will look at a pattern and look at the stitch that's in it. Certain fibers are more, certain yarns respond better to textured stitches and cables than others. And so I often don't make blanket recommendations. I like to be able to look at a pattern that you want to make and find out what your application is going to be, who are you making it for, and then we go from there to choose a yarn. So one of the most popular yarns that we carry at Perfectly Naughty is Alluru. And this has a very mohair-like effect. It's a cotton core, and it's got all the bright colored fun fluff on the outside is an acrylic, and then it has a polyamide fiber that wraps around it that has a little bit of a sheen to it. This yarn is surprising. Don't let its fiber content fool you. It's one, I do carry a few acrylic fibers in my shop, and this is one of them, and there's a reason for it, because it works up beautifully. The colors are amazing. These mixed up colors, they're random enough that the colors don't puddle up, which is really awesome, and you can move from one skein to the other without it getting tangled. It's also a great yarn to companion with other things. I just finished a project where I have it companion strand with an alpaca, and I've got another one that I'm plotting where it's companion strand with a solid color in a llama. And so, and which brings up another point, is that not all of us are allergic to all animal fibers. So the camelid fibers, alpaca, llama, camel, and they tend to be less allergenic. And I will never say hypoallergenic, because the only things really that you think you can put in that category are things like rice, water, air that's actually clean cotton, and pure silk. Very few things else actually are hypoallergenic. And so we use the term less allergenic. Let's see, what else do we do? We use a lot of linen fibers, a lot of plant-based fibers in the shop. This one right here is it's a flax linen, but they have some inherent issues when we're using them. They have a lot of drape to them. They have almost zero thermal value, which is challenging. And a lot of your plant-based fibers, you're going to find that. So there are concessions, this one's kind of cool. It's got an I-cord construction, so the natural drape that a lot of your plant fibers have, where that your garment or your item won't hold its shape, it's helped out by the construction of the yarn. So if you are looking at those types of fibers to substitute, look at the construction of the yarn and consider that in your substitution. I like this one. It's a really fun one. And then there's, a lot of ones that we're familiar with. Hemp. This is a hemp cotton blend. It's really crunchy and it's really fun. And it's the kind of yarn that shows your stitch texture. It does laces very well. But again, doesn't always hold its shape super well. You have to account for that in your stitching. But that's another really fun one. There's this Barocco has the remix, which is 100% recycled cotton. What is it? It's linen, cotton, acrylic, silk, and nylon. This one's going to have a little bit more warmth to it, because silk actually has a higher thermal value than sheep's wool does. And so it doesn't take a huge amount of silk to have something that's warm, and it can still be lightweight without being bulky. So this is another one of the ones that we like for substituting. It's got a nice texture to it, so that that helps to hold the shape of things. So those are some of that's another one of the factors that we have to think about in substituting a yarn. But the yarn manufacturers have started to get really fun and playful with things, which I think for all of us stitchers, whether we knit or we crochet, whether we prefer one fiber over another, I think that's really super fun, because it's just really, really fun to make something out of sugar. This yarn right here is made out of a viscose made from sugar cane. It's super soft and drapey and fun, and takes color really well, and it's just super fun and playful. That's a very popular one. Bellatrista Yarns is a local company. They're out of Bellevue. They're currently moving their factory to Eastern Washington. But he does some really fun stuff. This right here is not a terribly uncommon fiber, but this is soy. This is a really great substitution for a lot of things because it's textury and it's going to hold onto your stitch. You're going to get good stitch definition with something like this. This one is really fun and unique. This is milk. And yes, this is made out of milk. And what they do is they take the milk and they cook it down until it's a really thick consistency. And the same way that a spider makes its web, it's forced through a spinneret into these very small fibers that are then collected and spun. So this is a really fun and for anybody. It has it has very little thermal value to it at all. And it's because it's a viscose product, it's also going to have a lot of drape and movement, but which also means it's not going to hold a lot of its stitch, and things like cables and things like that, texture stitches would go flat. So those are things that need to be accounted for in making your substitutions. Bellatrista also has that we carry, this is a milk bamboo, similar thing over here. Bamboo is a really popular fiber. It's really coming up. It's very durable. It has some natural antimicrobial properties to it, and it's very resilient. The plant itself is very sustainable. And let's see, this is one of their new ones. It's super, super fun. Everybody wants to smell it, and so when you come up to check everything out and pet it, try to smell it, but it won't do you any good. It's made out of peppermint. He's also working on some other things that I don't know if this is top secret or sorry, Dale, if this was top secret, but he's working on some other ones, one of which is made out of coffee. So I'm really excited. Those are things that we will be carrying at Perfectly Naughty. Right now I have just these 4 of his product lines, but we will be expanding that after he gets set up in his new digs and we get through the yarn tour. So those are some of the ones that I brought with me tonight, just because they're super unique and interesting. But when you are wanting to make something out of an animal fiber for various reasons, there's several to choose from, and we carry several alpaca and llama options at Perfectly Naughty. We have a beautiful alpaca cotton blend, some 100% alpaca and 100% llama. And there's a lovely new alpaca rayon blend that we have as well that are just tremendously wonderful substitutions. They don't necessarily have as much of the elasticity that some of the wools have, depending on the breeds. But what they do offer is a softness that is unparalleled. The thermal value is actually higher than sheep's wool again. And so there are some benefits. And, you know, when people say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you can't knit with this, I'm like, darn the luck. I have to knit and crochet with silk and alpaca and llama. Oh, yeah, woe is me. It's really very sad. Very, very sad, right? So let's see. Some of the other fibers that are really amazing and also tend to be less allergenic, I don't carry them in my shop because the price points are just too high for the average person right now, but Kiviute which is muskox and comes out of Alaska for the most part. That is just phenomenal. And buffalo is another one that's coming up in the ranks. So some of the bovine fibers, and they are also they're also being shown to be less allergenic. Yak is another one that is, but yak, you want to make sure that you get yak down. Then that's the undercoat, because the long guard hairs on yak are very, very itchy, which is great when you're felting slippers, because it will felt, but it's great when you're felting slippers or an accessory bag or something like that, but not quite as awesome for a cowl or something you're going to wear right next to your skin. So, so yeah, I think that's really pretty much the basics on that. Does anybody have any questions that you would, yes, ma'am?
Out of curiosity, how burnable are those? You know, like wool is naturally fire resistant. Do they put a fire retardant in those? Or how do they burn?
I haven't lit any of them on fire, so I don't know how they burn. Things that are things that have cotton is extremely flammable. It burns hot, it burns fast, but unlike your polyesters and your nylons that burn slow and melt like a marshmallow and stick to everything, so it's gone in a flash. So I would imagine that that the viscose ones are going to be more along those lines, but like I said, I haven't tested them, and as far as I know, they haven't put any kind of a fire retardant in them. There's nothing that I'm aware of and that has been shared with me on that regard. That is something that I can't, the Bellatrista ones in particular, that I could talk to Dale about if that's something that you need more information on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially if you're going to make sweaters for kids. You know, I mean, just something.
Well, and that is always, you know, I mean, that's always a concern. The safety of our children, the safety and well-being of our children. But, you know, there's a lot of things, you know, that we keep on our bodies that are not necessarily fire retardant. You know, because, you know, so. Well, it is interesting. From a scientific perspective, it is kind of fun and interesting to like, and you can also tell a lot about what a fiber is because your synthetic and your rayon fibers will melt. Your like plant fibers often will just ignite very quickly and just disappear. And your animal fibers, they burn, but they burn slower. I mean, if you've ever, how many of us have ever accidentally singed our hair, right? Or, you know, lighting a candle and burned my fingernail. It burns, but it burns slow. And it doesn't flame and whoosh around, So, okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I have one comment and one question. I just
Yes.
wanted to share that hemp.
The hempatine? Mm-hmm.
That's my go-to yarn for making very nice washcloths.
Yes.
For gifts. And
Yes.
you're right about the stitch definition, and usually I'm on a size 4 and different eyelets and things like that. It's wonderful. And it gets softer and softer
It
as
does.
you wash it.
Hemp
Yeah.
loves to be abused. It is crunchy to work with it, but the more that you work with it, the more it will soften and relax. And unlike true linen, it doesn't get brittle with age. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so how many skeins of that would you use for a cloth? And if you don't mind me asking, how much is it cost a skein?
These are 153 yards. They're $7.99 a skein. And how much you would use, that is going to depend on the size of needles you use,
Yeah,
the pattern that you're using, if you're using a pattern at all.
I guess it is for a.
So I think, you know, what are you using?
I think most of them were like this
So it's
size.
7 or 8 inches.
Yeah,
7 or
and
8 inches.
one full ball.
A full ball.
Well,
Okay.
full ball.
That makes sense.
Good, and that sounds like a really nice gift.
And it is, and that's a great fiber to be making a spa cloth for your body. It would be really luxurious in a basket with some lovely soaps and lotions and things like that, to do something like that.
Been in production for a while, and I often find it for sale, on sale.
Yeah.
At some stores, because the colors are,
They've changed colors, yes. It comes right now, it's been coming in this size ball in solid colors, but they've just released a larger ball and in tonals. And those, we'll be carrying that at Perfectly Naughty later this, I think it comes in I want to say April. And so that's super, that is really, really lovely. And did you have a question too?
Are there any washing instructions or any hints about blocking? How different is it with these compared to?
That's really good. That's really excellent. So when you're washing and blocking, especially when you're working with the rayon type yarns that don't have that memory to them, that pulls it back in, when you block things, you want to make sure that you're blocking them very gently. You're not stretching and pulling them, because they are more inclined to stay in that shape where you put them. Washing instructions. My general washing instructions for anything that we hand knit or crochet is, if your washing machine has an agitator post, please don't put it in there. I don't care what kind of farm, I don't care if you use Red Heart Super Saver, don't put it in the washing machine with an agitator post, because the agitator posts are mean. But aside from that, just your general hand washing or delicate cycle that the labels on your yarn recommend. So for some things, obviously, that's just hand rinsing in your sink with cold water and a gentle detergent. Some of them, even the ones that say that they're machine washable, I mean, in a technical sense, they're machine washable. But again, that agitator post is what generally does the majority of damage to any of our yarn products, because it catches on the splines and pulls and stuff like that. It's a good question, though, and it's really caring for it. I mean, you put sometimes hundreds of hours into making this thing, and it's a piece of art that you are wearing, you know, so we want to take good care of that. Anybody else have questions? Yes, ma'am.
What do you have that is a good sock yarn?
A good sock yarn, Kobasi. Kobasi, it's cotton, bamboo, silk, and nylon. And I have a huge selection of colors in that. And that is my go-to sock yarn. There are a few others out there but they have a lot more acrylic in them than I like. And they're really pretty and they feel okay, but that has been the one that I stick with very, very consistently. Periodically, I'll bring in and out other ones as they catch my interest, and then they fizzle out. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Another question. Some of us are dabbling into dyeing things.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, about 2 years ago, we had a program where we got Knit Picks yarn and we had colors and we just, it was a lot of fun. But with those yarns, are there anything to be aware of? Like, will they take color well, or just?
Some of them are going to take color better than others, just as in your animal fibers. Your llama and alpaca yarns take color in a different way than your sheep's wool does. Cotton takes color in a different way than wool. Silk takes color in a different way than wool. I haven't played with the dyeing process myself. In talking with Dale, in the way that he dyes his product lines, he experiences that sometimes they take color a little more with that not quite solid look that I happen to really like, and I've been really encouraging him to play with that on purpose and not try to get a solid, perfect color, because those tone-on-tone colors are really delightful. But I myself, I'm not a dyer, so I haven't experimented with that aspect at all.
All about it if you want to hit me.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any of
I showed you, and this is a really great question. I don't know if everybody could hear you, but she was asking about using the plant-based yarns for making sweaters and things with shape in them. And this is, so what I would, that's a really great question. That's an engineering mind that's going on over there. I like that. And so what you have, so some of them are going to be more suited than others, and it would really depend on the types of patterns that you wanted to use. So some sweaters we make are very, very warm, like a coat, and that would be different than maybe a sweater we were wearing to be a pretty accessory, and we wanted it to move and move around. And so the other thing that we do when we're making things out of plant fibers is we engineer some structure into the garment. So we use slip stitches to keep things from relaxing too far. Where we might typically, where I personally avoid things that have seams like crazy, I might actually intentionally have seams because the seams are going to help provide some stability and some structure that the yarn itself doesn't have all by itself. Does that help? Okay, that was a good question. Anybody else? All righty, well then, thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate it. We'll be on the Yarn Shop tour again this year, so I hope that when you're out in this May that you'll stop by and see us. And if you haven't yet signed up for the newsletter for that, it's on at lystour.com. We've been sending out free patterns every Friday, so just a hint there. And if you'd like to sign up for my newsletter, you can go to perfectlynaughty.com and click the Contact Us. I don't send out a ton of emails. It's just not my gig, so there you go. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, too, because we're having fun over there.